Hey guys, Danimation here. Now, you may know that recently my favorite horror game, Bendy and the Ink Machine, got its sequel, Bendy and the Dark Revival. And playing some other stuff like Security Breach, Poppy Playtime, and seeing some other horror movies going around, I figured it's finally time I make this video for what I think makes horror scary. Pretty much a do's and don'ts of horror. This is mainly going to be for horror games, but there will be some references to movies. I'll probably do a what makes horror movies good video later, but right now this video is a what makes horror games good. So, horror gaming has actually been around for a lot longer than you might think. Franchises like Resident Evil and Silent Hill have franchises going back to the 90s. Hell, pretty much for as long as there's been video games, there's been horror video games, because with video games, they saw an opportunity to make horror more interactable, which would make it scarier. I kind of agree and disagree with that, but anyway, indie horror is when, and the internet, the combination of talented independent game makers and internet and YouTubers picking up your game, put that together is what I think created the massive indie horror game boom that is probably still going on right now. Just because it's evolving doesn't mean it's not part of the same pattern. A lot of people blame Five Nights at Freddy's for starting this craze, but I would disagree with that. I think the craze can be dated back a little bit further than that. To me, the craze truly started in 2012 with the iconic game Slender the 8 Pages, which made the internet urban legend Slender Man, I think, a little more popular. To me, the 8 Pages is really when Slender Man was at his most popular. The Arrival was still a great game, but 8 Pages was, I think, what did it, and the movie is what killed it, because the movie was terrible. Anyway, so, as I was saying, is Slender the 8 Pages actually worthy of kicking this off? Is this actually a good game? And should we really give this game all the credit for starting this massive boom? Well, to put it simply, yes. To me, these are the things which made the original Slender such a great game. A simple objective. Pretty much with Slender, you pick up the game, you know exactly what you need to do. Pretty much just walk around and find a bunch of pages and then game ends. That's all you need to do. To be fair, that does sound boring when you put it that way, but to me, what makes a lot of games boring is when they cram in too many objectives at the same time, and half the game you don't even know what you're doing. So to me, the best kind of game is when the objective is simple and you know what you need to do. Challenging without being frustrating. This is something that I can tell you I ought pretty much. This is like a godsend to me when a game is challenging but isn't frustrating. To me, what kills horror, specifically in gaming, what kills a horror game is when you die, it's never scary, it's always just frustrating. Maybe you die the first time and you get a little spooked, but then when every single time you die, you treat it like you die in any other game. With Slender, it never feels like that. Every time you die, it feels like actually it is scary. Like Slender Man just coming at you, it's creepy. I think you can attribute that to Slender Man's design, but it's not just that. Pretty much anyone can get pretty far in Slender pretty much on their first playthrough. And basically the whole part is he gets faster with every page you get. You know, simple enough. Again, simple objective. It's challenging without being frustrating. So you're never angry with the game. You're always on edge, and you're always nervous that you're not going to finish it, but you're never frustrated at the game. An eerie atmosphere. This to me is what make or break horror. Put it simply, forests are creepy, specifically when they're in the dark. And that is what all of Slender takes place. You're always in a dark forest. It never holds your hand. It never gives you 5 minutes of shelter. You're always out there, which makes you always on edge. This is what the horror factor gives me. To me, it's not about the jump scares, it's not about the look of the monster. As long as the atmosphere is good, it's scary. To me, Slender is a master at that. Just a creepy woods. It's simple, but it's creepy. So the game never holds your hand. And the most important one, it understood what it was. Slender, look. Slender is not a cinematic game. It's not going to be the next Last of Us. It's not the next Uncharted. And it knows that. Like, Slender, it's never going to be the next Bioshock. And we all know that. Most importantly, the game knows that. It's not trying to cram too much story, too much lore, and innovate with every single thing they do. Like, how can we make this the most revolutionary thing? How can we make picking up a page off a tree and being chased by a guy with no face be revolutionary and game-changing? Put it simply, you don't. Slender understood what it was. It was a small indie game designed to creep people out. It wasn't even looking for a fan base. It was just saying, I might make like $20 with this game. Cool. See? It understands what it is. And to me, when you understand what your game is, that is when you start building a franchise. To me, have you ever wondered why Slender the 8 Pages and Slender the Arrival stayed consistent with the creepiness? It's because it understood what it was. It never tried to appeal to another demographic and just tone it down. If they ever changed the tone, they were going up, but going up slightly, so you didn't notice it. To me, the most important thing when you're crafting a horror story is you understand what it is. Now, none of these I'm going to say are rules to make a good indie horror game, but I'm going to call them more guidelines. And pretty much every indie horror game that I like right now, or liked at some point, has at least had one of these and broken another. Now, it may have had all of them, that's what makes the best one, but I think some of these franchises got too big, and in like they're growing, they broke one of these guidelines, which is, I think, might be what threw them over the edge. Now, let's talk about probably the biggest indie horror franchise of all time and see how they do with these guidelines. You knew I was going to have to talk about it at some point. Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, the original Five Nights at Freddy's, in fact, the original Five Nights at Freddy's trilogy, they do all of this. They know what they want to be, at least with the first 3 games. It's a simple objective, just survive until 6 a.m. They have a really, really eerie atmosphere, and they're challenging without being frustrating. The problem is, Five Nights at Freddy's, they broke one of these guidelines, which led to them, with their latest game, breaking them all. So, can you guess which guideline they broke? Yep, you guessed it, understanding what it was. Five Nights at Freddy's 1, compare it to Five Nights at Freddy's now, you don't even recognize it anymore. The original 3, 4, 5, hell even 6 Five Nights at Freddy's games, they know what they are. They're trying to end the story. Five Nights at Freddy's has a complicated story. Now, a complicated story, that isn't in the guidelines, meaning, yeah, fair game. You can make whatever story you want. This is merely the execution of that story and how scary it actually ends up being. Five Nights at Freddy's, they sacrificed the scary to make a franchise. After, say, Five Nights at Freddy's 6, hell, up to VR, which is a great game. I mean, VR is probably my favorite Five Nights at Freddy's game. I mean, they've just signed it to a new company, but that is, in my opinion, where they should have quit while they were ahead. Five Nights at Freddy's, it had its own story, and pretty much, you could have left the whole Vanny thing on a cliffhanger, and I would have been completely fine with that. Knowing the Five Nights community, they probably wouldn't, but I'd be completely fine with it. I mean, in hindsight, at the time, I probably wouldn't. But still, Five Nights at Freddy's didn't understand what it was. They didn't really understand that just from the games alone, that the franchise was over, and there was no need for a soft reboot. That's what I believe Security Breach is. It's a soft reboot. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's not a full reboot, but it still acknowledges the previous events, but going in a different direction. To me, that's what a soft reboot is. And to me, that's what Security Breach is. Now, let's talk about Security Breach. In my opinion, the bratty child of the Five Nights at Freddy's family. Now, before every toxic 12-year-old on the planet comes at me with a pitchfork, wow, toxic 12-year-old, I'm actually pretty proud I managed to say that without messing up. Anyway, before they all come at me with pitchforks, let's get the record straight. I don't hate Security Breach. It's an alright game. It's not bad, but it is the worst of the Five Nights series. I was about to call it a trilogy. It's way more than a trilogy now. I mean, Security Breach is the 9th canon game. But through breaking the rule of understanding what it was, Security Breach sacrificed a lot. Now, when I say understanding what it was, to me, what Five Nights at Freddy's is, it's an eerie story. It's dark. It's about kids being killed and put into animatronics, which they then possess and come after you. To me, that's what it was. Five Nights at Freddy's was dark, but just not as dark as other stuff to get some younger people interested in it. To me, that's what it was. It was dark, but not quite dark enough to have an 18 or a 15 rating, but it never, ever sacrificed the creep factor for their demographic. That's what, to me, Five Nights at Freddy's was. When Security Breach came out, it was all colourful. There was nothing eerie about it. So it broke the eerie atmosphere one. There was so many objectives at once, broke the simple objective rule. And of course, challenging without being frustrating. Security Breach is not challenging in the beginning. When it gets to the challenge, it confuses frustrating gameplay with challenge. I just played, literally today, or at least today at the time I'm recording this, because this video may take a few days to make. I just beat the Monty boss fight, and my God, did I hate it. To me, that is the worst boss fight I have ever played. And I played the Hulkbuster fight in the Incredible Hulk video game, which I've already said on this channel I hate a bunch. Between Monty and Hulkbuster, I'd rather fight the Hulkbuster. So, yeah. As much as I'm complaining about it, Security Breach actually does have some cool moments in it. The relationship between Gregory and Glamrock Freddy is pretty cool. Vanny's my second favourite FNAF character now, with the exception of William Afton. There's William Afton, Vanny. I mean, Vanny could have been a great villain, but I think Security Breach, it didn't do her justice. That's the thing. It's sacrificed to appeal to a younger audience, and that is something in horror I think you should never do. And their most hyped character, Vanny, at least for me, she suffered because of that. For Vanessa, I think you need a more mature story. That's why I think fan projects like Vanessa Into Madness really do her justice. Like Night Cove of the Fox's Vanessa Into Madness, that really does her justice. That does Vanessa justice. To me, Night Cove is the definitive Vanessa. I really feel like, I don't know which pronouns to use at this point, but pretty much Night Cove is better at playing Vanny than Security Breach is. So, Security Breach, it sacrificed horror for a more child-friendly brand, and to me that the game's most interesting character suffered because of that. Now, let's compare that to Bendy. Now, call me biased if you want, because I've already said Bendy and the Ink Machine is my favorite game of all time, but to me, no matter how you feel about Bendy and the Ink Machine, to me, they kept all those guidelines all the way through the first game up until Bendy and the Dark Revival, which has recently come out. Or they've at least redeemed themselves. So, the first chapter had an eerie atmosphere, simple objective, and it challenging without being frustrating, and it knew what it needed to be. Chapter 1 knows what it is. It's a little self-contained introduction to this world. Chapter 2 is amazing. It introduces probably my favorite Bendy character of all time, Sammy Lawrence, and Sammy is an extremely creepy character, so he fills out this eerie world. Chapter 3 introduces Alice Angel. We finally get a character that is done justice. To me, Alice Angel is the best female horror character of all time. Chapter 3 and 4, I think, no matter how you feel about Chapter 3's fetch quests, you really get a sense to know Alice. Chapter 4 is when the innovation started to happen, and Chapter 5 is to me when it fell off the edge. Just Chapter 5, I feel like it was almost a different game. Oh, sorry. Sorry if you heard that in the background, just like a picture dropped or something. But, okay, going back to Bendy. To me, Chapter 5 is a low point for Bendy and the Ink Machine, as it kind of fell off what it needed to be. But unlike Five Nights, Bendy knew what it was and went back to it with Dark Revival. Bendy did what Five Nights at Freddy's could not do. Bendy managed to save its own ass. And just like that, we got probably the best horror game of the year. I mean, the year's not even over. I mean, the year's gonna end in a few weeks anyway. I mean, it's December now. So the year's gonna end in a few weeks anyway. So, but yeah, Bendy and the Dark Revival is the scariest game this year. So Bendy managed to save its own ass. And, you know what? FNAF didn't do that. Oh, sorry, I just got a message. Shut up, phone. And, I'm too far into the recording to stop it now because, that's gonna stress me out. But anyway, Bendy and the Ink Machine to me is, well, it's great. It takes what Slender did right, turns it up to 11, and you can say what you want about the story being bloated. Remember, a bloated story, that's not in the do's and don'ts. You can make whatever story you want, as long as you follow the guidelines of this game. And to me, Slender did it right, Five Nights did it right for a time, Bendy is still doing it right, which to me, no matter how, whether you like or hate the creators of the game now, you can't deny, Bendy's a good game when it's at its best. And to me, Chapter 2, Chapter 4, and all of Dark Revival is Bendy at its best. And if that's Bendy at its best, oh my god, Bendy is really freaking good. So, yeah, Bendy to me is a great horror game. Now, let's discuss its cousin. Look, I'm not gonna milk Poppy Playtime, I think I've done that enough. But I do think this is a bit of a Bendy clone. That's kind of something I think most indie horror games need to do to be good, which is be original. Poppy Playtime definitely has an original story. Is its gameplay original? No. But to be fair, that's nothing new. Slender was a walking simulator, Bendy was a walking simulator, but at least they had a unique twist on it. Poppy Playtime, in both story, or like similar aspects of the story, gameplay, and just overall premise, it's a bit similar to Bendy. If you just copy what's successful, it doesn't guarantee you're going to be successful. But Poppy Playtime was successful. Now, Does the copying make Poppy Playtime a bad game? No. Does it take away a little bit of its credit for me? Yeah, it does, actually. Okay. Is Poppy Playtime better than Security Breach? Yes, 100%, but it's not better than any of the other FNAF games. Bendy is miles better than it, and Slender, I think, is still better, but Poppy Playtime, I think, is an example of start off copying what's popular, but then be original. Because Chapter 2 of Poppy Playtime is great, but Chapter 1 is still, like, probably the biggest Bendy clone I've ever seen. Anyway, let's get into a game that is extremely original and does everything right to me. Now, I've already made a fan film on this game, so you may or may not know that I love this game, but yeah, Duck Season. Now, I've already said Bendy is my favorite game, but my second favorite indie horror game is probably Duck Season. Probably because it follows all the guidelines, and it isn't afraid of its demographic. Kids will probably like it, but Duck Season it does have a dark story. I mean, it's in VR, so, automatically a win there. So what other VR game can you have a giant dog with a knife come up and stab you? I mean, come on. Think about it. You kind of want to play it now, don't you? Anyway, Duck Season to me is the perfect horror game because, it's got a great atmosphere, it's eerie, and it's challenging without being frustrating. And it's simple. Duck Season is a simple home invasion story. And you know what? For the kind of game they were going for, it works to have supernatural elements with a home invasion movie. And making a VR game out of that? Stress level 0, shut up and take my money. So to me, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Slender, and now Duck Season are perfect indie horror games. Hope you enjoyed this video. I've been Danimation. Bye-bye.